when you're able to bring your behavioral strengths, talk about them during an interview, then you're painting a much more vivid picture for the people that you're speaking with so that they can see you, envision you doing your thing in that role. Welcome to the Love Your Work Life podcast, where you will get encouragement, strategies, all the things you need to love your work life. This is about transformational, strength-based coaching for career, for leadership, for life. I'm your host, Elissa Shuck. Let's get started. One of my absolute favorite things to do when I'm coaching clients is interview prep. I know I sound like a total weirdo because I actually, during the job searches I had throughout my career, I actually really liked interviewing. I like talking to people. I like being curious and learning about the role. But that is not normal for most people. Most people work with me because interviewing gives them everything from pause to heartburn. Like, just don't like it. Don't like talking about themselves, don't know how to talk about themselves. It's very common. But most people think there's something wrong because they're feeling that way. And it's really nothing wrong. It's that some people aren't natural storytellers. No big deal. Easy to fix. Some people just get really nervous. It's like that fear of public speaking, right? Where you just get really nervous and anxious when you're in a situation where you're talking to a stranger. Add to that you're talking about you and your stories and all the things, then it can get out of hand. It can feel really difficult. Now, y'all know that I love a good LinkedIn poll, and I posted one recently. The question I asked is, what is the most difficult thing about interviews? And the options were not knowing the questions in advance, giving concise answers, and managing stress and anxiety around an interview. And of course, I put a little other in there, sharing comments, which only had 5%. But here's the results of those other three responses. 15% of people said that the most difficult thing was not knowing the questions in advance. 36% of the people said giving concise answers, and 44% of people said managing stress and anxiety. And we combine those two, right, the 36% and the 44%, then basically 80% of the people are struggling with how they answer questions and managing the stress and anxiety. Interesting, not surprising. Everybody that I coach around interview preparation has these similar things. And it's so funny because when I'm coaching people, sometimes they'll actually say, "Oh my gosh, can you do the interview for me?" When we start going back and forth with the answers and the responses, and we're having so much fun, and it's now feeling light instead of heavy. It's like they want me to be Cyrano and just have that little microphone in their ear and tell them what to say. But here's what I want to encourage you with today. If you find yourself in interviews, and this could be you're searching for a job for whatever reason, you've gotten laid off, you're making a pivot, you're ready to give yourself a promotion. It could also mean that you are interviewing internally. It could mean that you're in a job performance review with your boss. The principles that I'm teaching you today have universal application when it comes to communication. Now, primarily, I'm working with folks who are wanting to take control of their career, wanting to love their work life again, and so they're doing interviews. Here's what I want to tell you is that your interview isn't just answering the questions they are asking. Your interview is a communication strategy. It is you putting thought and process and preparation into place and then communicating strategically, communicating in a way that aligns you to the role and assures them being the audience, whoever you're talking to, that you are well equipped to deliver in that role, to solve problems, to make their life easier and better. That's what's happening in an interview. When I'm working with someone, my process is, first and foremost, we do a survey of their natural behavioral workplace strengths and transferable skills in the workplace. Now, this is a very short 5 or 10 minute questionnaire, but it gives me 18 pages of descriptions about them, describing their strengths, describing the traits and characteristics that underpin their success in the workplace. Now, this is a beautiful report because when you combine this report with their expertise and their knowledge, now we have this really amazing, comprehensive picture that they can talk about, that they can leverage in those conversations. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And the reason I always do this first, well, we may have done a consultation or something in advance, and I know a little bit about them. But honestly, sometimes I don't even look at their resume until we've done this report because it's so validating. It's telling a story about you that feels so good, especially if you're in a workplace that has you feeling really beat down. It's so nice to have things that you know about yourself, things that aren't really a surprise, but maybe you haven't given yourself enough attention to them. It's so wonderful to have these strengths communicated to you. Such a great starting point. And you must know these things about yourself when you're going into an interview, first of all, because it builds up your confidence. And second of all, when you're able to bring your behavioral strengths, talk about them during an interview, then you're painting a much more vivid picture for the people that you're speaking with so that they can see you, envision you doing your thing in that role. Communication strategy. And this helps you be more deliberate in your messaging. When you are coming into a role, familiar with the job description, really familiar with the strengths that you bring to the role, and you're prepared with that, like it's all sitting there in your brain, and you're comfortable with it, and it starts to feel like second nature because you've been reorienting yourself to your accomplishments and your strengths and the contributions that you've been making. When you own that, you're like an athlete. Athletes can improvise in the situation because they're well prepared. They have well-honed skills. They can respond and react to the unknown because they're so well prepared. And so when I talk about interview preparation, yes, I want you to know about the company. Yes, I want you to familiarize yourself with the role. But most importantly, I want you to know yourself. I want you to prepare yourself through mindset and emotion regulation. That's how you can give concise answers. That's how you can manage the stress and anxiety around interviewing. Of course, you're being put on the spot. That's just part of the deal, right? That's part of the process. But when you're put on the spot and you're so well prepared, because right before you go into the interview, you have reminded yourself of why you're there, of all your strengths, of all your experiences, and even reminded yourself of your favorite accomplishments, you can handle the unknown that's being thrown at you, and you decrease the stress and anxiety because you've changed your brain chemistry. You're going into that conversation in a better state of relaxation and a higher state of critical thinking. That is a key component of interview preparation. And in fact, in the show notes, I will give you a link to download the interview preparation worksheet that I give out to all of my clients. And it walks you through this process of removing any doubt out of your mind and refilling your mind with the reasons why you're there, the reasons why you're perfect for the job, reminding yourself of some amazing accomplishments. So when you walk into that conversation, when you walk into that interview, when you walk into that job performance review or that internal application, that internal conversation for that next role, you will feel amazing. Now, you might have butterflies. I totally get that. But butterflies is a lot different than anxiety. And it's so important that you regulate your emotions when you enter that conversation, because that's how you're going to show up as your best self. That's how it works. Now, the other thing about interviews is you're guiding the narrative. We can't control what someone else is thinking. That is true. But you can guide the narrative going on in their head. That is removing distractions. That is being proactive. That's what I mean by communication strategy. Hey, if you know that they're going to ask a question about a gap on your resume, and they probably will, we don't like it, but that's just the way things are, then you can actually address that in advance, even in how you answer the tell me about yourself question. To me, how you respond to tell me about yourself is the most powerful moment in an interview, because this is where you set the tone. This is where you set the stage for guiding the narrative the entire rest of the conversation. Because anyone that's interviewing someone, they're going into that conversation hoping and praying that the person they're talking to is the one, that they're done, that they know who they're going to hire, they know who they're going to put into the next stage and get closer to that hiring decision. Tell me about yourself is the opportunity for you to immediately align yourself to the role, showcase why you are the one that can solve their problems, and give them that aha moment, oh my goodness, they might be the one epiphany. Because when you give them the epiphany, guess what happens? This is just how our brains work. And you know it's true if you think about some situations for yourself. As soon as we get that epiphany moment, the whole rest of the conversation, they are looking for reasons that that light bulb moment is true. So as soon as they think, oh my gosh, they might be the one, every little thing that happens that confirms that thought throughout the rest of the conversation is reaffirming that you might be the one. That's what you want. You want them seeing you through that lens. I will also put a link in the show notes to an old podcast episode about how to answer common interview questions. Tell me about yourself being one of those, and I'll give you a framework for how to do that. And then there's other ones like weaknesses and strengths and why should we hire you? All the things we know are coming, right? That's why when I'm working with someone, we don't wait for an interview invitation before we start practicing interview questions and responses. Because the common things we know are coming can be prepared well in advance so that you have ease and certainty answering those questions. The responses that you give just roll right off your tongue. The last thing I want to say about guiding the narrative is you've also got to guide the narrative going on in your own head. You can't be thinking throughout the interview, I've got to prove myself. I hope they hear me. I hope, I wish, all those things. The narrative going on in your own head is one of confidence, one of certainty, one of I'm meant to be here. You wouldn't have been invited if you weren't meant to be there. You wouldn't have been invited if they didn't see something on your resume that had them curious, that had them intrigued, that had them thinking you are worth talking to. That's the narrative that I want you to have going on in your own head. You're meant to be in that conversation. You are interesting to them. You have nothing to prove. When you have that kind of narrative going on in your own head, you're guiding the narrative going on in their head by how you're responding to questions and aligning yourself with that role. And you're so well prepared and so secure in that knowledge of yourself that you can pivot and you can turn and you can respond no matter what. That is how you win. So if you are doing a lot of interviews, but you are not getting job offers, it's a good news, bad news story, unfortunately. Good news, hey, your resume's working for you. Your resume's doing the heavy lifting that it needs to do, but your communication strategy needs help. So take responsibility. Think about those conversations. If you're not moving forward, then my guess is that stress and anxiety is getting the best of you and you're slipping into convincing energy, or your answers are not in alignment with what they need to hear. The interview is about you, but it's for them. It's like a marketing campaign. Products we buy don't overly emphasize all the tech behind the scenes, all the tiny little details. What it emphasizes is how it makes our life easier and better, how it's aligned with our lifestyle. Really, the marketing is communicating, I understand you and I am your solution. My friend, that's exactly how you want to think about an interview. So next time you have a conversation about you for that next thing that you're aiming for in your career, think about it from the perspective of communication strategy. There are things that you're going to have to do in an interview that are winging it, but when you're prepared and you're thinking of it strategically, it doesn't feel like winging it. It feels like flow. It feels like you've got this. That's exactly where I want you to be, and that's exactly where you can be in your next interview. All right, my friends, I will talk to you soon. If you like listening to this podcast, I invite you to visit the Love Your Work Life website at elissashuck-careercoach.com. On the site, you're going to find free resources and information about all of my coaching programs, everything you need to land a great job, advance your career, and lead and build an awesome team. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn.